This transition is not going to be easy. State resources are going to be taxed as we do this. We have the competing challenge of staffing in Afghanistan. We have the competing challenge of the number of people who have already gone to serve in Iraq. A similar factor that we have in the military is that people are going to have to go back to Iraq to help with this civilian buildup. But we're working very closely, and Ambassador Chris Hill and General Odierno in Iraq are working very closely on the parameters of this cooperation as we transition. The second transition is very important also, and that's a transition that's going on in Iraq. What I saw that was one of the most important events during my 11 months in Baghdad was the transition on January 1st of this year when the UN mandate ended and Iraqis declared full sovereignty over their country. There really was a change in the air when that happened. Iraq is pursuing a sovereign course that depends on Iraqi institutions and the Iraqi government taking the lead in a way that represents an Iraq nationality and Iraq status. I think that elements of that are in politics. We saw that in January with the provincial elections. And though Ambassador Dobbins was correct that there was violence after the 2005 elections, there wasn't violence after the provincial elections. And in fact, people tended to accept the results, which were quite surprising. Sectarian-based parties did badly. Iranian affiliated parties did badly. Traditional incumbents did badly. This is where we first saw the open list system where individuals were held accountable. Prime Minister Maliki and the State of Law Coalition did very well based on security and services. And we saw a real participation in the process that we believe will be reflected in the national elections. Now, these, of course, are more important. But as Deborah said at the beginning, the fact that the Parliament did come to agreement on an election law, including discussion of the issue of Kirkuk, was extremely important. If you may recall, the provincial elections went ahead without Kirkuk being included, and that led to a veto by President Talabani last summer that caused all sorts of problems. So we are seeing a political participation that we believe shows a transition in the politics. Now, as we talk about the major transition in Iraq, I think what we're looking at is politics rather than sectarian violence, and politics is going to be messy. We're going to continue to see political interests rather than the institutional interests that are so important for that society. And that's where I go back to the Strategic Framework Agreement. One of the key motivations of that agreement is to build the institutions that will continue as we go through a period of government formation, which will be the first politically messy time that we have. It took almost 5 months to create a government after 2005. Politics remains the same, and politics may even be more important, so we don't see that being necessarily a shorter period this time. We need those institutions, economic, educational. We need those links that we can work with the Iraqi government as we go forward. I think that's extremely important for our partnership and the way we'll move. I think that what's also important is to talk about Iraq's regional role. And this is where I have to say that I've seen that Maliki did confound most of the predictions that he wouldn't be able to stand up to Iran, that he wouldn't be able, and the Iraqi political parties themselves viewed that he would be a weaker leader. And I've seen that there is an Iraqi nationalist trend that has led to a resistance to Iranian influence. I would say that when we look at how relations with Turkey, and it's quite clear that Turkey was the country that's most recently invaded Iraq, when you look at the dramatic change in 1 year in relations with Turkey, where Turkey now is working both with Baghdad and with the regional government of Kurdistan on a way forward based on shared economic interests and shared interests against terrorism. When you look at the visits by Prime Minister Erdogan, President Gül to Baghdad, Prime Minister Maliki going to Turkey, we really see that the Turkish approach, which is also domestic on how to deal with the PKK, reflects a new maturity in that relationship, which is extremely positive. One of the things that I was involved in was setting up a joint counterterrorism center aimed at the PKK in Kurdistan that include people both from Baghdad and the KRG and Turkey, which was unthinkable 2 years ago. When you look at Iran, when you look at the fact that the Iranian-affiliated parties did much more poorly in the provincial elections, when you look at the change from a more hard power covert action to a much more soft power trade delegations from the Iranian side, we see that the Iraqis are making clear that they're not going to be subservient to Iranian desires. There will be, of course, influences from Iran, but we see that that's positive. Switching to the GCC, Saudi Arabia is key there. We understand that the problem with a Shia government for Saudi Arabia will remain, but we're hoping that after this election, there will be an understanding that there is likely to be, into the future, a Shia government in Iraq that the region needs to deal with. And we saw that at the end of last month when the Egyptians had a strategic cooperation of their framework of their own, which they launched with the Iraqis. Egypt has just sent its ambassador back after the tragic assassination of an ambassador in 2003 or 2006. They've sent an ambassador now to Iraq for the first time. That link, having Sunni countries link with Iraq, is key to some of the issues that we've talked about in general. I could talk about some other relations, but I want to skip to give more chance for questions. Let me talk about challenges. Since security is always in the media, I'll start with that, although I don't think that's the biggest challenge. For me, from Yemen to Morocco, the way Arab governments deal with security threats is through effective intelligence. And I think that the high-profile attacks, the bombings of August 19th and October 25th, underlined for the Iraqis that intelligence is the key for to being able to defeat the enemy. And they need to go from 5 different intelligence services to at least coordinating their intelligence. And that's something that they are addressing, that they do realize. We see the extremists started with targeting economic infrastructure, moved to encouraging sectarian discord by mosques and churches, but now we see that they're targeting, as Deborah said at the beginning, just indiscriminately targeting buildings, government buildings, which will have no resonance in the Iraqi populace. Of course, the Kurd-Arab conflict. This is going to be something that takes years to resolve. Right now, everyone is working together because the Kurds will have a very significant role to play in government formation after the election. That's something, though, that with these coalitions that have been formed, there may be a basis for agreement after the elections, but it will be, and it will continue to be, the most potentially destabilizing issue. Roles of sectarian parties and Sunni disaffection. The Sunnis are participating in the national elections. This is key. We'll see, but they're so divided and their expectations are very high for these elections. We'll need to see what happens there when after the election results are in. Sectarian parties. So far, the coalitions have focused on multi-sectarian coalitions. If Maliki joins the INA, the Shia coalition, this would be a sign that they're moving away from multi-sectarian coalitions, and that would be a bad sign. Corruption. We talked about corruption and the influence on the economic system and the political system. This is going to be something that we have to redouble our efforts to address. And the role of a strong judiciary, which is one of the things that we're promoting, is key to that, as well as a free press, which we're also very keenly focused on. One of the greatest economic dangers is return to a statist, centrally run economy. That's something that I know that is of great concern. We've had some progress, the oil bid rounds going to private international companies, but this is going to be an issue that we have to watch very closely because the tendency is centrally controlled economic policies, which will not be good for the future and will not bring the private investment, which is key. Protection of minorities. It's absolutely critical that the minority populations, who unfortunately tend to be mainly in the Kurd-Arab fault lines, are protected. The government of Prime Minister Maliki has taken steps, and there are protections there, but this is going to be a continual issue that we follow. So I think that with those challenges that we're going to be addressing next year, we have a way forward that's going to be based on a strategic framework agreement and on a partnership and a commitment and a withdrawal timetable for our U.S. troops.
Thank you.